Welcome to Trinidad and Tobago's opposition media briefing this Friday, the 31st of January, 2025, discussing the Commissioner of Police and the state of emergency. Today, we have presenting MP Dr. Roodal Moonilal, the shadow for the Ministry of National Security, and also Attorney at Law Mr. Wayne Sturge, who is the UNC candidate for Toco Sangre Grande. Thank you for joining us. We will begin our broadcast shortly. In the meanwhile, please share the live.
But one of the things I promised is that we will listen to what's happening around, and we've been listening, and whatever we could have done, we've been doing so far. You're bigger than what I remember you last time, so we're standing up to make a difference in this country, boy. You know, and we're interested in making sure that in San Fernando West, we are listening to what the issues are. I just talked to Supers, they tell me about the water situation on that side. In speaking with all of our constituents in San Fernando West, crime was highlighted, issues of drainage, garbage collection, and we spoke to the Alderman Viliana Ramotasing and all our councillors, and they really went to the city and ensured that something was done about it. The team here is in San Fernando West. We are on the ground, so I want to see what's happening around West St. Joseph with my friend Devish.
Davis March, I'm the UNC candidate. West St. Joseph. What's your name?
Braffett.
Braffett?
Yeah.
Braffett, how old are you, boy?
68.
Nah.
As a young man.
He's like 52, boy.
We started building back here before too much went on the other side that we had to come down to First Street. So, like somebody know the minister, and they get box trains and paved road and all kind of stuff up to the drain. We on the other side of the drain. You know the story about the other side of the tracks. We on the other side of the drain. So we ain't getting fixed up and we getting flooded. I would just like to know that we have somebody there who we can talk to.
Right now, we are on 7th Street, Mount Lambert. I have met so many lovely people on this street. Very reserved, some of them, but they've all come out and they've given us very, very encouraging comments. Some of them have openly declared their support, for which I am very, very thankful. Others at least saying they will consider and think about it, but really, really a wonderful community. I've had no pushback from anybody whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it's very, very welcoming. Thank you very much. When UNC win, everybody wins.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the press. Good afternoon to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, viewers and listeners across the Caribbean and the wider region. This afternoon, we are live at the office of the Leader of the Opposition in Port of Spain, Trinidad, for a very urgent and important press conference to speak on critical matters that have arisen in Trinidad and Tobago over the last few hours. As you are aware, we have been facing within the last day or so a series of unprecedented, unparalleled, horrific events which speak directly to the ineptitude and incompetence of the PNM administration and the government in office. Notably, the state of emergency and, of course, the arrest and detention of the Commissioner of Police. There are also other related issues that have developed over the last few days. We intend today to address these matters. I also want to state at the beginning that normally when matters like these arise, such critical matters in the public space, one expects that the government and the responsible ministers would address the nation. To this point, we have had no word from the Minister of National Security or from both de facto and de jure prime ministers of this country. In the absence of the government and in the context of the deafening silence of the government, the opposition has taken the lead here to speak to the nation on these critical matters. I'm joined by a very prominent attorney at law practicing in the criminal jurisdiction, former UNC senator in the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and a candidate in the upcoming election in the Toco Sandy Grande area, no less a person than Mr. Wayne Sturge, who will join us and address us on these very critical matters facing the nation at this time. Wayne.
Thank you, Dr. Moonilal. Good evening, members of the media, and good evening to members of the national community and those looking on abroad. Today, I address you not just as a national, but as a practicing attorney at law of 27 years. As a citizen or as citizens of this country, it must be of great concern that our country is in deep crisis. We are at day 33 of an SOE with dark clouds hanging over the head of one of the country's most senior national security personnel. At a time when we face great uncertainty regarding exactly who is leading the country, there is a clear crisis of leadership. We are on day 33 of the state of emergency, and after 32 full days and some of this state of emergency, it seems as though there is little, if any, meaningful change to the levels of violent crime, particularly murder. We are at 30 murders at this point, and that is nothing to boast about, that it's 10 or 12 less than last year, because what happens when the state of emergency ends? To quote the jury Prime Minister, a state of emergency is not a crime-fighting measure. It is the last card. And when it fails, what next? It is notable, though, as a lawyer, and concerning, that the government seems to have gone into overdrive with respect to the issue of detention orders. The concerns with the overdrive regarding detention orders are myriad, but in the main, I will identify the principal issues. Firstly, the issuance of detention orders without criminal charges being laid soon thereafter must mean that the legitimacy of these detention orders are highly suspect. Detention orders, by their nature, can exist only during the life of the state of emergency, which means if charges never follow on from the detention, then one has to ask whether there was ever any credible information in the first place to necessitate the detention, and why the information was not actionable. The inability of the police to have the claimed information converted into evidence is even more disconcerting, as it means that once the SOE comes to an end, as it must, the detained person, assuming he is a legitimate target, will be free to carry on as before, unrestrained. The failure of the police to convert the information relied upon and to detain suggests a systemic failure, possibly owing to a lack of resources, lack of proper training, or worse, with the end result being a worrisome stagnation of our existing abysmal detection rate, and when what we need now is a meaningful increase in crime detection. Despite what they say are or is a claimed success, it is palpably clear that the objectives of the SOE have not been met in any meaningful way, and that the SOE is nothing more than the government's latest crime-fighting measure, which is in reality its last-ditch effort, and which by nature has a very limited shelf life. Day 33 of this SOE, and one of the most senior office holders in any SOE happens to be under arrest. Given the nature of the allegations which surround the Commissioner of Police, in particular we ought to be very concerned, as this, at the very least, speaks of criminal negligence on her part, or worse. And it raises the question as to why an agency tasked with intelligence gathering would be liaising with the Commissioner of Police to arm itself with weapons of the type described. The arrest of the titular head of the police service during an SOE is even greater cause for concern, as it adversely affects the image of the service as well as possibly affecting the morale of its members. The arrest and detention of the Commissioner of Police not only calls into question her competence and suitability in the first place, but it also calls into question the suitability of those who decided that she was a suitably qualified candidate to be selected. The arrest of the Commissioner of Police must be a serious blow to the national security apparatus, as it throws suspicion on the credibility of those entrusted with national security. The failure of the government to move swiftly to address this chaotic state of affairs and project stability is also cause for major concern. We have heard nothing from the line minister, nothing from the Attorney General, and nothing from the person handpicked as Prime Minister or the political leader of the ruling party. I want to end by asking for a bit of lateral thinking, which arises from a very recent ruling of our country's highest court. There are those among us who have been calling for the abolition of the Privy Council. We have seen this week why we need to keep the Privy Council as our final appellate court. They are detached from and have no links to our feared political class. They apply the law dispassionately without fear or favor. So lateral thinking: if we are to fix crime, we must first fix our protective services by having a unit staffed with persons who are similarly detached. We must also give serious consideration to repealing the legislation brought by this government in 2015, which removed foreign nationals from consideration for appointment as Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police. This legislation was brought by the government to allow the government to control who could be appointed as Commissioner of Police, and we have paid a heavy price for this decision. We cannot expect a reversal of the decline if we continue appointing those who are palpably unsuitable for the job of Commissioner of Police on the sole basis that they are friendly to the political directorate, or on the specious and tenuous argument of national pride and sovereignty. I close.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sturge. And Wayne would be available at the end of my presentation to take some questions and elaborate, if necessary, on some of the issues raised. Members of the press, the developments in the public space over the past couple of days, these developments have led to a state of panic, trepidation, anxiety, and stress, in addition to the normal distress and disturbances that we have faced over the last 10 years. It is not for me to tell you that we told you so, but indeed, we told you so. In office, Dr. Rowley, his team, including Mr. Stuart Young and others, have destroyed every institution that they have touched, whether it is the office of the president, the service commissions, the judiciary. Every institution that they have interfaced with, they have destroyed. And today we are seeing the result of that. I just want to remind you that during the period 2010-2015, when we had the lowest rate of serious crimes registered in 35 years, Dr. Rowley and others attacked the partnership government because we had an acting commissioner in place in one Mr. Williams. We live to see the day when, under this administration, indeed there was no commissioner in place, no substantive commissioner, and that led to a lot of gymnastics by the Minister of Finance to allow for the payment for resources and goods and service in the TTPS. Today we have the scenario of the first sitting commissioner of police, I believe, in almost 50 years to be under arrest. This is a tragedy. It is disturbing. But as Mrs. Prasad Bisesa rightly pointed out yesterday, it is not surprising given what we have been seeing in the public space and some of the information that has come to us. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa on January 6th at a recent Monday night report spoke of this issue of investigations by the TTPS into the procurement and approvals for firearms, weapons, ammunitions, etc. It is noteworthy that we believe that it is the forensic staff that flagged guns that were carried for testing as being prohibited weapons and therefore not in a position to be granted approval by any commissioner of police. The prohibited weapons category carries certain names and title, designation, and so on, and the forensic department had flagged those weapons. The investigation, we believe, involving the Commissioner of Police is one that has been going on for some time. It is not recent. Whether it's 10 months, 12 months or so, it is not a recent development. Yet, with this matter, Dr. Rowley, who often beat his chest as chairman of the National Security Council and in touch and in charge, they would have had a commissioner of police before the National Security Council, a director of the Strategic Services Agency before the National Security Council, a chief of defense staff before the National Security Council, every single week for years. And not once that National Security Council or its members, including Colm Imbert, Marvin Gonzalez, Stuart Young, Fitzgerald Hines, recently Keith Scotland, not once they interrogated that law enforcement leadership on the procurement of weapons. Not once they interrogated the law enforcement leaders on investigations, not to know details, but whether or not a sitting commissioner is the subject of a criminal investigation. And went on, the opposition UNC raised a matter when Mrs. Erla Christopher was being appointed in Parliament. And let's face it, the entire hierarchy of the police service has been appointed effectively by the PNM. They came to Parliament and knocked down the names of officers who were in a certain order, in a merit list, so to speak. They knocked down those lists and arrived at Erla Christopher. We raised concern that they were appointing someone who was going to retire in 3 months. They went ahead. They did not tell the population or the parliament that they had an intention to use another piece of law to extend that term as a police officer. So they appointed someone with 3 months left as a police officer in the service. Thereafter, they continued to do extensions, and I believe 2 extensions. That matter reached as far as the Privy Council. Mr. Ram Logan and others had raised that matter. The Prime Minister, Keith Rowley, Stuart Young, and others went to the Privy Council to defend the tenure of the sitting Commissioner of Police so that she may have that extension. So this is their role. This is their job. I'm making this point to the media to know that this is not just a police matter. This is a political matter involving the Prime Minister, the National Security Council. They appointed the 3 deputy commissioners of police. They appoint the executive through the parliament process with their majority. In that debate, I participated and pointed out that Mrs. Erla Christopher was about to retire. They said nothing. They just vote yes, all of them. They extended twice, went to the Privy Council to defend that appointment. And today, look where we are today. This is their doing. So we are not surprised at all. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa also raised a related issue on the political platform which deserves repetition today. Was the state of emergency called to provide under Regulation 11, that infamous Regulation 11, to provide for a gun amnesty, to provide for a gun amnesty to allow any government official to return a weapon that was prohibited, illegal? That is a critical concern that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has raised. Today, the incompetent Attorney General reported that he had withdrawn Regulation 11 and they are not implementing it anymore. But he did that when the UNC pointed out that you had to go to Parliament to amend the law to have a gun amnesty. You couldn't do it through these regulations. But was their agenda to allow a government minister or any other official to secretly and quietly, surreptitiously return any weapon that was deemed by the Forensic Science Department as prohibited? That is a question that we leave on the table. Members of the press, in those circumstances and where we are today, in this very troubling time, the police service, as Attorney at Law Sturge told you earlier, there is no substantial reduction in crime. We have had 30 murders in 31 days, and I'm not counting today because we haven't had the sunset as yet. So we are not counting today. But the police service is now in a state of chaos, to say the least. And notwithstanding a press conference, which I saw earlier today, pieces of the press conference and so on, I asked the police service today, as officers are asking themselves, I asked the 7,000 plus police officers now, who is the Police Service Commission? They have said nothing. In fact, some of us don't even know who they are. They could be in the room now and we don't know. The Police Service Commission has to act one way or another, because this now is leading to a constitutional crisis fabricated and built by Keith Rowley, Stuart Young, and others, where a police commissioner is in place and being investigated by a subordinate police officer. When I was watching this morning the press conference, I was waiting for a moment when Erla Christopher could have walked in there and asked those 4 people to get up and leave the room. She may have had the authority to do that under the law. But we are in a state now where who is directing the police service? Is it the substantive, constitutionally appointed Erla Christopher? Is it one of those deputy commissioners? One declared this morning that, is it he? He said he was the senior deputy commissioner of police. I noticed the frown on the faces of others. But who is directing the police service? And who is your leader? That is the question that we pose today, given this, that we are in a state of emergency. When Mr. Burrows, whose name came up today from the grave, was suspended and later charged, I believe, there was no state of emergency in place. There's a state of emergency where the regulations provide for a commissioner of police acting on her, on the power vested in her during a state of emergency. It may well be that the parliament has to meet in an emergency to look at the appointment of another commissioner of police, given where we are with the current situation. This is an unfolding drama that you cannot find on Netflix. You cannot find it there, not even as a new release. So the questions that we pose today is, where will this end? When will it end? We are also being told of other, in fact, almost every head of law enforcement, you are hearing by the hour that they could be arrested, may be arrested. Whether it's the chief of defense staff, you heard that rumor, whether it is the SSA director, former SSA director, the commissioner of police. In fact, the only head of law enforcement now that we haven't heard yet to be arrested is the prime minister. He's the head of the National Security Council. So this has led to enormous distress and disturbance, notwithstanding the press conference today of the police service. And I remind members of the press, it was in the very meeting, January 6th, where the opposition leader spoke about a license granted to no other person than Dr. Keith Rowley in 2023 for a particular weapon, stunner weapon, I believe it's called. I don't have the big name for it now, that there's a name for it. And 500 rounds of ammunition to shoot pigs, granted to the Prime Minister by the sitting Commissioner of Police. When ordinary citizens had to go to court, face the court, to demand that the Commissioner of Police deal with their application for their firearm user's license, citizens, business persons who want to protect their family, protect their property, protect their children, they have to go to court to tell the commissioner, please grant us consideration for a license. The commissioner replied in a court document, I'm very busy. I can't address all of that now, I'm busy. But Mr. Man, Prime Minister, he got his license to kill pig. He got that with 500 rounds of ammunition, I believe. And this is the situation that the PNM and Keith Rowley allowed to develop. When they could have gone to the parliament and presumably appointed someone else, they allowed this matter to develop. So today, we have a dangerous precedent as well, where a commissioner can be appointed with 3 months left on their service, and then they, of course, have the full pension and benefits of a commissioner of police. You all see the parallel now? So a prime minister could be appointed, and with 1 day service, he receives the pension and the salary of a prime minister. This has happened with commissioner, it has happened with prime minister, and this is a dangerous precedent that we are establishing, members of the press. So we believe that the National Security Council has not done its job, it has collapsed. We believe that the law enforcement community is now reeling under the pressure, the burden of incompetence and corruption by Dr. Rowley and his cabinet. And it is a matter that involves all cabinet members. All cabinet members must take responsibility. That is why in another platform we said they must all go. They must all go. Because they are responsible for the appointments of these key individuals that today you hear being locked up, being jailed, facing this charge, facing that charge, and so on. We cast no aspersions, of course, on the guilt or innocence of anyone. That is a matter for the justice system and the courts. We cast no aspersions. We cast no aspersions on the work of the police. There are thousands and thousands of hard-working, committed, and dedicated police officers. One expressed today, the person said to me, look at what my beloved organization has come to. I mean, there are people who work in the police service, that is their life, that is their career. They love the organization and that work. And today, the integrity of that organization has come into question. And if the police officers have this feeling, the criminals are now buoyant, jubilant, because they look on, not by reading necessarily, but by instinct, by noticing what is happening in the wider society, and realize that the police service is in the state and they can run rampant even during a state of emergency. Because what has changed in the state of emergency? We have the criminality, we have robberies, we have home invasion, we have murder. They have seized weapons and so on. They announced today weapons seized. That is good. We are pleased with that. But those weapons could have been seized outside of a state of emergency. The law provides for that. If they had a difficulty getting a warrant, then use a legal process to change the process to speed up or become more efficient. But you cannot suspend the rights, constitutional rights of citizens in order to protect them. You cannot do that. That is the hallmark of a dictatorship. And while that is happening, I wanted to make another point. We must not take our attention away from the other crises in 1 week. I want to remind you, in 1 short week under this administration, we had the Coast Guard. Some people call them now the Ghost Guard. They tied a vessel that survived 6 months in the Atlantic Sea, Ocean. They tied a vessel to a boat and then lost it. They lost human remains, the Coast Guard. When we heard of that, the next day a Caribbean airline flight crash landed at Piaco. Then when we were getting over that, the Privy Council ruled against the Minister of Finance and suggested that he be investigated. And that matter with the Auditor General, which is a critical matter involving not just the Minister of Finance, but there's a hidden person behind him, the Attorney General, who advised the Cabinet as the legal advisor on instituting an investigation that the Privy Council thought was improper, unlawful even. They said that the Cabinet acted in a manner driven by Reginald Amor, some call him by another name, I forget the name, but the Cabinet acted on his advice to establish an unlawful and improper investigation. And he's hiding now as well. The same place with Hines. They are hiding there. The government is on the run. They are hiding from the population because the Attorney General must answer for his pre-action protocol letter in that matter of the, I have it in my hand here, look at 15th April 2024, when the matter broke with Ms. Jayanti Ramdas, Auditor General. He issued a pre-action protocol letter before you blink. He already write demanding documents and demanding this action and that action. When we are told the Ministry of Finance was not even consulted on this matter, the Attorney General moved. Well, the Privy Council has ruled that he acted improperly. So the Attorney General must answer questions. So while we focus on the Commissioner of Police, let us not lose sight of Imbert and his role, and the Attorney General and his role into this matter, the Privy Council. And we ask ourselves, how much, with great respect to the attorneys at law, I know some people don't respect, but great respect, how much money did they earn? How much money did they charge to represent at the High Court, the Court of Appeal, the Privy Council on this matter, where it was a matter where they were trying to prevent the Auditor General from reviewing a decision? Essentially, I think that's it. They were trying to prevent the Auditor General from using the court to review. They went to the Privy Council, Senior Council and others went to London, travel first class or business, whatever they call it, stayed in hotels, eat food, drink, whatever, to represent the Attorney General and the Minister of Finance in a lost cause, which would have cost the taxpayers thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. That is where they have reached, taking the money. Members of the press, I just put back those issues in the national domain for you to keep a record, because the way the PNM operates, they operate so fast with their incompetence that you lose track. You forget what happened last week. You just cleanly forget that. So I want to remind you again that the Police Service Commission in these matters must make themselves known at best. They cannot keep quiet as these matters evolve in the public space. We also have this situation where in the context now of what is happening, there is this complete blame game. And I think persons in the national community have already, spoken on that. But every time a crisis appears, they blame the public servants. And I want to remind you, as I come to this matter, on this platform, in the platform of the UNC and elsewhere, Parliament as well, we have called on the public servants to desist the temptation to do the dirty work of the PNM in their last days. I want to tell police officers with great respect and public officers with great respect, including permanent secretaries, do not do the dirty work of the PNM in their last days. You will be held accountable by an incoming UNC administration. You will be held accountable if you decide in their last days to do their dirty work, because they will also throw you under the bus. In fact, the PNM may have to buy more buses now to throw people under the bus at the rate they are going. When we remember when this matter arose with the $2 billion statement, a shocking $2 billion that couldn't be accounted for, the Minister of Finance blamed the public officials, blamed public servants for some error in accounting. When the matter arose with the pension, remember that? Where they were going to take away the pension of the elderly. The Attorney General said, well, I wasn't here, but I think the public servant pushing that, to use a local term, they chucking that in the bill, and I didn't see it. They blamed the public officers when that happened. When there was a cyber attack by at TSTT, which had serious and grave consequences on confidential information from citizens and public officials. The first thing they did, they said nothing like that happened. When they admitted it happened, they said some public officer, employee of TSTT led to that. By their failure to do this and that, they blame the public officers. When we face a water crisis, they blame WASA workers. When we face a health crisis, they blame doctors and nurses. They blame the doctors and nurses for poor healthcare services, long waiting times and staff shortage, etc. In national security, the Prime Minister, no less a person, he blamed police officers for the escalation in crime. He said police officers sleeping in the police station in the night. They're hiding. When time comes, they take off the light and hiding. The same commissioner said, no, that doesn't happen there. Well, tonight she will know, or last night she will know whether that is true or not. In the fuel crisis, when gas stations ran out of fuel in 2023, they blame the truck drivers and staff of NP. No time do they blame themselves. Do they say we are responsible and we take blame for anything that happens in the public service? So we have to reject that type of lie on the part of the government of the day. We know that we are in a state of emergency, of course, with all the ensuing matters relating to rights and the regulations and so on. And this, of all the time, is not the time for a crisis in law enforcement at a time like this. The United National Congress pledges that in a few short months, we will work to restore public faith in law and order and the law enforcement community. We will restore confidence in the police service with proper, strong political leadership. We will work hard. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has led several years, has been leading on the public platform and speaking of our policies to reform the criminal justice system, to deal with crime. That is now a matter on public record. We have spoken at length about the new policies we will introduce, whether it's stand your ground, whether it's home invasion, laws to deal with home invasion, whether it's to deal with kidnapping for ransom, whether it is to deal with gang violence. We have spoken at length to reform the court system and so on, so that we believe that a UNC government will restore law and order and faith in the police and confidence in the police service in a very short period of time. The risk we face now is, given this crisis, that Dr. Rowley does not intervene again as he did before to manipulate the institutions and appoint another hand-picked commissioner of police without proper vetting, without proper consultations, without proper contemplation. In fact, it would be proper for an incoming government in these circumstances to deal with that matter. The government of the day, Dr. Rowley, to this day, Dr. Rowley has not given an explanation as to why he is demitting office. Is Dr. Rowley demitting office because he's unwell? Because of failing mental faculties? Is he demitting because he has a family matter or something like that? Why are you demitting office months before your term comes to an end? In any serious democracy, a leader, prime minister or president, would tell the population why I am demitting office before time and seeking to install a successor. A prime minister in this country, except for one time in our history when the sitting prime minister died, Eric Williams, no prime minister has been elected this way, has been appointed this way. That is improper. It runs against the grain of democratic and constitutional principles. The electorate must decide on a prime minister. A prime minister cannot be like a medieval king and have your, you are ruling the kingdom and then you decide, well, my successor will be. And you pick a child from somewhere in the castle and say, this is the successor. It doesn't work so in mature democracies and in constitutional arrangements. The electorate must be the final arbiter on matters of political conflict and elect a prime minister. To this day, Dr. Rowley has not explained why he is leaving office mere months before the termination of that term of office that he has embarked upon, that he's serving. So the government is in a complete freefall mode at this time. Regardless of which area you look at in the national economy, and we have been speaking about economics and the various sectors, they have all but collapsed. So at this time, the Prime Minister has no option but to dissolve the parliament and call a general election. We have said before, and we say it repeatedly on other platforms, when the UNC wins, everybody wins. Today I want to tell the police officer, when the UNC wins, the police service and law enforcement wins. They will win as well. The last time the police got a significant or any meaningful increase in their salary was under the People's Partnership. They got a bonus as well, that $1,000, the bonus. The last time they were provided with the resources, the technology, the equipment to fight crime was under UNC administration. So when the UNC wins, law enforcement wins as well. And I'd like to leave it there, but to remind you that in the future we'll be speaking on other matters as well in the public space, particularly matters of infrastructure and the provision of basic goods and services to the population, whether they be water, electricity, and so on. So I would just like to leave it there now and to invite some questions from the reporters who are here in person and those of you who are following the broadcast on the social media platform. So thank you all very much. We have a few minutes left, of course, that we can do that at this time. Yes.
So what do you believe that the Police Service Commission should do now? What do you believe is the best course of action?
In the circumstances that we face, the first thing is that the Police Service Commission should make a statement that they have been looking on, observing closely the state of the crisis that we face in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, particularly with the Office of Commissioner of Police. We do not know whether they have been in touch with the government, whether they have been in touch with the police service in particular on these matters. There's a course of action that they can follow, whether it is an action to suspend the Commissioner of Police in these circumstances, appoint an acting Commissioner of Police. They have to contemplate that. But first, they must wake up. They must say something. Now, what has happened in this country is that the law has changed to the extent that if you have to appoint an acting commissioner as well, you go to the parliament. So that the parliament has a role to play here. So that the government has disappeared. The Police Service Commission, which has been handpicked by the PNM, is asleep. The police is saying everything is okay, they are strong and working well. The population is in awe. And that is the crisis that we face. So that the Police Service Commission ought to issue a statement that they have met or they have considered the matters before them and are seeking advice, whether it is legal advice or what they are seeking, whether or not they have been in touch with the Office of the President, for example, concerning these matters, and whether or not they propose to act. Because as of this moment, we do not know if the Police Service Commission is alive.
Do you believe that's what they should do, however? Should they suspend Mrs. Haywood Christopher and start the process to appoint an acting commissioner?
In these circumstances, I don't want to say what they should do in that. They should take legal advice. they should consider that we're in a state of emergency and they should make some type of movement by way of a proposal of some kind. What I fear is that they may depend on their political bosses, both Keith Rowley, Fitzgerald Hines, but they want to be Prime Minister Stuart Young as well, and they will want to take political advice which they ought not to take in these circumstances. That is the fear.
What do you think is the best move for the country then for the Police Service Commission to?
At this time, the best move for the country is to have a general election.
No, for the Police Service Commission.
The Police Commission ought to issue a statement and indicate to the country whether they have taken note of this and they intend to meet, have discussions, and take any action. I cannot offer them advice that way. That really is not my function as well.
Why do you think we haven't heard from Dr. Rowley or any of the Ministers of National Security as yet?
Your guess is as good as mine, Akash. This is not surprising as well. In periods of conflict and crises, they have been known to disappear and reappear later. So I think that this crisis is really egg on their face because they have appointed this commissioner and others, and they may now be, trying to find their feet in this crisis and unable and unwilling and possibly scared of facing the population and maybe scared of facing you in particular on matters like these. So to answer your question, it may be a mixture, a cocktail of all of those reasons. Yep.
I mean, is this current situation lawful if a commissioner of police is removed from office? I mean, well, we have different laws. I mean, there's a Police Service Act. Then there's going to be all this thing with the state of emergency. But I mean, what we saw this morning, is that lawful? Do we know or?
Well, these are matters really for contemplation by the authorities. But to me, I'll just give my view as someone in Parliament in this in the business of lawmaking for some time. I would say that it is unusual, these circumstances, terribly unusual, and they having deputy commissioners of police assume what they did this morning as leadership of the TTPS, while there's a sitting commissioner of police, is highly unusual. What is even more extraordinary, it is taking place in a state of emergency where the regulations provide for the role, the function, and the authority of a substantive commissioner of police. And that is the crisis that the country faces now. And I want to say that on the ground, the police officers themselves, from our feedback, are in a state of ambiguity on these matters now.
Is with this okay? So we're in a state of emergency with all these regulations. Is there a danger that the commissioner's rights, the normal rights she may have, like let's say to legal representation or to freedom of movement, are not to be detained unduly long? Because I think the regulations allow for 2 weeks or however long it is.
I would ask Mr. Sturge to respond to some of these matters.
I would
as
ask
well.
if there
he has
is
the expertise and the experience.
If there's a risk of unfairness, happening, but because of in other words, the provisions of the state of emergency regulations, if that could actually facilitate some unfairness towards the commissioner, a lack of even-handedness, we would say.
Wayne?
To answer your question, first of all, the commissioner at present enjoys the presumption of innocence. We accept that. But the bigger picture in the circumstances of us being in a state of emergency, one, and having regard to the office she holds, I think it is untenable that the line minister, the head of the National Security Council, and the Police Service Commission, that they remain, or it seems that they remain deaf and mute. It is untenable, although there is a presumption of innocence, for the Commissioner of Police to continue. Let us assume she is not charged with any offense. How do we justify her continuance having regard to the nature of the allegations? how would that square off in terms of public confidence in the office of Commissioner of Police, and again having regard to the nature of the allegations? It is untenable that she would be allowed to continue. And to add to what Dr. Moonilal has said, it is my view that the Police Service Commission at this point is empowered to suspend her. They are empowered to suspend her, and it is necessary, in my view, to return to the Parliament to trigger the processes to have someone appointed, because we cannot continue, having regard to what the regulations are and so on, to be without a Commissioner of Police. The police service, as it stands, is leaderless and rudderless. You cannot, at this juncture, have the DCPs and so on put on a public face which suggests that it is business as usual. The office of the Commissioner of Police is one that finds itself in the Constitution. So it is not for persons who are not constitutionally appointed to assume a mantle and to tell the public, those in the national community, that they are authorized to continue in her vein. It is necessary, I reiterate, it is necessary in very short order that we trigger the processes. I don't know if they are afraid of returning to Parliament, but they ought to return to Parliament and trigger the necessary processes so that someone can be appointed substantively or to act in the interim.
Just to clarify, so your suggestion is that the PSC suspend?
Should suspend. She should be suspended.
Okay.
And the PSC doesn't necessarily need a criminal charge for suspension.
Okay.
One knows that disciplinary action can be taken outside of a failure to charge. If assuming that she's not charged, then the PSC can still convene the necessary tribunal, hear evidence, and come to its own conclusion and implement what are the measures open to it to discipline. You do not need a charge, you do not need a conviction.
This thing with the SOE regulations, if you could remind, I actually can't remember how long it is. Like, if somebody is a suspect in a case, like in a criminal case, the police are now allowed to detain the person under the SOE regulations. Is it for? Could you remind me how long it is for?
Initially, let me go on what happened recently with one of the detainees.
Mm-hmm.
There's a distinction between detention under the SOE and being charged for criminal offences.
Okay.
That's an entirely different thing.
Okay.
If you are detained pursuant to the emergency regulations, then initially the Commissioner of Police would issue a detention order. I believe, from recollection, I think it's 7 days in the first instance, but once it expires, then the Minister of National Security will issue a detention order, and thereafter one is free, although there is no remedy of habeas corpus, because that is one of the remedies suspended by the proclamation of an SOE. One can still go before the tribunal. I believe the head is Ms. Deborah Peake, Senior Counsel. And one can still go before the tribunal, as has happened quite recently, and make representations as to what advice ought to be provided to the minister, which advice would include to end the detention or to limit the term of the suspension.
So before
of the detention, sorry.
So before you go to a tribunal to ask for freedom, somebody could be subject to either the 7 days that you remember, or I think it's 14 days, I seem to remember. I think it's 14 days then plus a 3 months or something.
Right.
But
no, after would be the second phase would be the Minister of National Security. He assumes the detention order. The first one is with an officer at the rank of ASP and above.
Right. Because I'm just wondering, if in the current case, the current person we're speaking
commissioner?
about, the commissioner, I mean, if the question I did have, I'm coming back to the first question about the normal rights that a normal citizen of Trinidad and Tobago would have, in her case now, are they likely to be curtailed to the tune of, if it's the 7 days you speak of, under this SOE emergency regulation?
We don't know at this stage if she's detained pursuant to the SOE. That's the first thing. If she's detained pursuant to the SOE, then an officer of the specified rank or above can issue the initial detention order, and then the minister would continue it. And having regard to what is in the public domain, this investigation has been ongoing for some time. So that and when I say sometime, I mean before the proclamation of an SOE. So that I imagine this is a criminal investigation which is unconnected to the SOE.
I was just going to say, the point, connected or not, whether an SOE was ever anticipated. The fact is, we are in an SOP under these provisions. If a charge was brought under the SOP, if it was somehow, then you could find a commissioner being in,
It is theoretically possible, but the reality is, yes, things may have happened before the SOE, and yes, even though it happened before the SOE, it's quite possible that a detention order could be issued. But what I am saying is that having regard to what is in the public domain, it has to be shown that there is a nexus, a connection to the SOE, to the purpose of the SOE, before a detention order is issued. As you know, right now there are citizens who are being charged with criminal offences. They are not subject to detention orders. They appear in court every day and get bail. But once you are arrested in pursuance of the regulations and so on, and a detention order is issued, then you cannot come before the municipal courts. You appear before a tribunal if you are to seek relief.
Okay. Do you think the President of the Republic has a role to play right now?
The President usually acts on the advice of the Cabinet. I don't believe she ought to exercise or should exercise sole discretion in these matters. What is required is that the PSC would go before her and indicate what the situation is, and perhaps ask for even a revocation in these circumstances.
Dr. Olio, Dr. Moonilal, I wanted to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question as
I'm not sure I want to accept the question.
as deputy leader of the UNC. Why did you all pull out of the Council for Responsible Political Behavior?
That matter, as you know, has been the subject of a release, I believe, by the party and by Mr. Dr. Mego. I just want to say in response to that the United National Congress will abide by the Constitution and the law as it relates and pertains to all election campaigns. Each citizen in this country have the right to approach the court if they feel wronged, or if they want to seek redress, or if they feel aggrieved in any circumstance by the actions of the United National Congress on our campaign trail. The citizens will judge our campaign when they cast their ballots at the ballot booth. That's how we will be judged eventually. We will not be judged by any other institution that way, but by citizens. And this is the right of every citizen. If they feel aggrieved, there's a process they can follow. So in those circumstances, we want to wish the council well in their future endeavors.
You still didn't answer why, though. Why did you all feel you didn't need to be part of it?
We believe that the courts and the rule of law provides for citizens already. If they feel aggrieved by any action or inaction by the UNC on a campaign trail, they have redress. So that is the reason, effectively.
So you have no confidence in the council?
All I would say is that we have confidence in the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
Because
it's
almost, the council didn't have any real legislative powers per se, or any disciplinary powers per se, but it was, I remember back in 2014, it was almost taking a moral stance, and that you all will, behave on political platforms and during campaigns. So why do you need to leave it, considering that it's just, a promise that we'll behave and nothing legislative holding you?
As I say, I've given the reason, acceptable or not, but I've given the reason that we believe that the electorate will judge us, and there is a process for anyone aggrieved, anyone feel, wronged by the campaign of the UNC or the statements or words of any speaker on a UNC platform. There are processes for redress, and we want to wish that council all the best. I just want to return to an issue raised earlier. Sean, I think I hope I didn't misinterpret what you said. You were saying SOB and not SOC. The state of emergency, not SOB. But it could be a SOE by a SOB. So what I wanted to state in that circumstance of that question was that the country now is in utter chaos. Today, I want to reiterate that the country and the government has lost control over institutions of the state. That is leading to a vacuum. In that sense of a vacuum, the criminal elements may well rise. So that we wanted to warn the population as well that we may well be headed to civil unrest, not unlike what we saw in 1990, when there was also a vacuum in leadership. And this has been caused by the incompetence and corruption of the government. Citizens must feel fear in these circumstances. They must feel fear for their safety because the criminals are now emboldened. The country is a power keg that can explode at any time. And it seems that the government is actually waiting on a total breakdown of law and order, where there is looting or unrest, before they act. The elections are the only remedy to return stability, peace, and security to Trinidad and Tobago. We believe that citizens should exercise heightened vigilance at this time for their personal security. Now that the government has taken a backseat, they have effectively thrown up their arms, and they are unable and unwilling to provide leadership to the protective services and the law enforcement community. I repeat what I said earlier, the hierarchy of law enforcement, whether it is the police service, whether it is the Police Service Commission, whether it is the Police Complaints Authority, they are handpicked by the PNM administration. And all these institutions have had their difficulty. We are now facing the grave danger of a police service that appears to be undermined. And as Attorney at Law Wayne Sturge told us a few minutes ago, where there's a crisis now of leadership and serious problems that can arise in that circumstance. As I would end, decades ago, I think it was David Roodal who exclaimed, "This is not a fete in here, this is madness." And we have arrived at that point. Thank you all very much. May I also thank the media personnel who are not with us but following. May I also thank all the thousands of viewers, listeners on our social media platform who have been following us for the evening. And the United National Congress will return to the public space quite shortly with the various meetings and fora that we normally hold. So thank you all very much, and God bless you, and be as safe as you could be in the circumstances. Thank you.
But one of the things I promised is that we will listen to what's happening around, and we've been listening, and whatever we could have done, we've been doing so far. You're bigger than what I remember you last time, so we're standing up to make a difference in this country, boy. And we're interested in making sure that in San Fernando West, we are listening to what the issues are. I just talked to Supers there, he tell me about the water situation on that side. In speaking with all of our constituents in San Fernando West, crime was highlighted, issues of drainage, garbage collection, and we spoke to the Alderman Viliana Ramota Singh and all our councillors, and they really went to the city and ensured that something was done about it. The team here is in San Fernando West. We are on the ground, so I want to see what's happening around West St. Joseph with my friend Devish.
Davis Maharaj, I'm the UNC candidate. West St. Joseph. What's your name?
Braffett.
Braffett?
Yeah.
Braffett, how old are you, boy?
68.
Nah.
as a young man.
He's like 52, but
We start building it back here before too much went on the other side that it. But we had to come down to First Street. So, like somebody know the minister, and they get box trains and pave road and all kind of stuff up to the drain. We on the other side of the drain. You know the story about the other side of the tracks. But we on the other side of the drain. So we ain't getting fixed up and we getting flooded. I would just like to know that we have somebody there who we can talk to.
right now we are on 7th Street, Mount Lambert. I have met so many lovely people on this street. Very reserved, some of them, but they've all come out and they've given us very, very encouraging comments. Some of them have openly declared their support, for which I am very, very thankful. Others at least saying they will consider and think about it, but really, really a wonderful community. I have had no pushback from anybody whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it's very, very welcoming. Thank you very much. When UNC win, everybody wins.
Do you know that in 2016, 66 liters of diesel cost $100? Today, under the PNM, you get 20 liters of diesel for $100. The diesel you paid $100 for under the UNC now costs $327 under the PNM, which directly affects the cost of food, transport, and services. Guess who I'm voting for next time?